There's something undeniably thrilling about a wildlife safari. The open landscapes, the raw beauty of nature, the chance to see lions, elephants, and leopards in their natural habitat. It's the kind of adventure people dream about for years. In rare but haunting cases, the very wilderness that draws us in has claimed lives in the most disturbing, unpredictable ways. These aren't just accidents. They're terrifying reminders that when you enter the wild, you're not in control. It was Saturday, June 5th, 2021. A clear, warm morning in Zion National Park. Cassie Brown, 26 years old, laced up her boots, checked her gear, and set out alone. An experienced canyoneer and trusted guide with the Zion Adventure Company, Cassie wasn't new to the landscape. She had explored these canyons countless times, sometimes with fellow enthusiasts, other times with her mother, both drawn to the thrill and silence of Utah's sandstone labyrinth. But that morning, for reasons still unknown, she chose to go solo. No one could have imagined it would be the last time her family would see her alive. Cassie's love for canyoning wasn't just a hobby, it was a passion she lived and breathed. She was methodical, safety-conscious, and deeply respected in the community. So when she disappeared without a word, it sent ripples of dread through everyone who knew her. The canyon she chose that day wasn't known for danger. In fact, many considered it easy. But Zion has a cruel way of turning familiar ground into something unforgiving in an instant. As Cassie descended a narrow rappel, her rope, her lifeline, suddenly jammed. Tangled on a ledge, it refused to budge no matter how many times she tried to free it. Alone, suspended in a remote canyon with fading daylight, she was faced with an impossible choice: wait and hope that someone might happen upon her, or try to ascend the rope back to safety. She chose to fight. Attempting a rope ascent isn't easy, even for seasoned climbers. Every motion has to be precise, every grip flawless. But at some point during her climb, the rope gave out. Just like that. A sickening snap echoed through the canyon as Cassie plummeted 50, maybe 80 feet into the hard, unrelenting rock below. The fall shattered her body. Bones broke. Organs ruptured. But she was still alive. For a short while, she held on. An hour later, another group of canyoneers stumbled across abandoned gear. Cassie's gear. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. One of them raced back to alert Zion's search and rescue team. Crews mobilized. Hiking routes were shut down. The Narrows, Mystery, Orderville Canyon, all temporarily closed. Even shuttle stops and riverside trails were blocked as emergency responders raced against time. A helicopter circled overhead, but the canyon's steep walls and narrow passages mocked every attempt to reach her faster. When rescuers finally reached Cassie, she was lying broken and barely conscious. Medics worked quickly, desperately, fighting to keep her with them, but it was too late. Within moments of being found, Cassie's body gave out. She died there in the silence of the canyon she loved, alone, but not forgotten. Her body was recovered the next evening, and as word spread, grief followed. Friends, fellow guides, and canyoning enthusiasts poured out tributes. One called her a master of the limestone slots, a guide whose skill and spirit brought safety and awe to those who followed her lead. Another remembered how deeply she cared, how she shared her love of the outdoors with everyone she met. Dr. Thomas McAfee had spent a lifetime saving others, guiding students, leading hospitals, unlocking the complexities of medicine. A man revered for his intellect and admired for his calm strength. But on one unforgiving day in September 2013, far from the lecture halls and hospital wards where he had made his mark, all of that was stripped away. Out in the raw, pulsing heart of Africa, none of it mattered. The wild had the final word. He had come to Tanzania's Tarangire National Park seeking stillness before a new beginning. At 58, McAfee stood on the edge of a major transition, about to leave his post as a prominent dean at UC San Diego to take on the role of chief executive at the Keck Medicine of USC Medical Foundation. But before diving into that next chapter, he chose to pause, to breathe, to wander among the wild things. He had been to Africa before, drawn to its rhythms, its mystery, its promise. This was meant to be a final indulgence, a reward for years of dedication. Instead, it would be his end. The land was golden, sprawling, ancient. Baobab trees rose like giants from the earth, and the skies stretched wider than the eye could grasp. McAfee set out on foot with two companions, hoping to witness nature without barriers. Close, honest, real. But in the wilderness, intimacy comes with risk. And when that line is crossed, nature doesn't whisper warnings. It erupts. They saw the elephants before they heard them. A herd, silent but watchful, rising from the brush like moving boulders. No trumpets, no stomping, just presence. Maybe they got too close. Maybe the matriarch sensed something. Maybe it was just a moment, one single invisible spark that ignited terror. The reaction was instinctual. They turned and ran, but McAfee stumbled. His foot hit a patch of uneven ground, and just like that, he was down, vulnerable, alone. The elephant charged, no hesitation. A wall of flesh and power, unstoppable and ancient. Its steps shattered the silence, pounded the dirt, and then it was on him. The impact was immediate and merciless. The weight of nearly 7 tons crushed down again and again until there was no hope, no breath, no more time, and then silence returned. Help came, but it was already too late. The man who had mastered the complexities of life was gone, claimed by a force he could neither predict nor escape. His body was taken to Arusha Lutheran Medical Center, and preparations began to bring him home. But how do you bring someone back from a moment like that? How do you explain it? His sister, Skylee McAfee, spoke through the heartbreak. He was doing what he wanted to do, and it was true. He had always known the dangers. He respected them, but even that respect couldn't shield him. Because in the wild, there are no credentials, no reputations, no second chances. Back in California, the news sent shockwaves through the halls of UC San Diego. Students, colleagues, and friends struggled to grasp it. This man who had guided so many was simply gone. It's a true tragedy and great loss to all of us, wrote Munir Soliman, a fellow leader in the medical community. Memorials were planned, tributes were written, but the void he left behind was too vast to fill. And still, questions lingered in the dust. Were they with a guide? Was the trail too close to the herd? Should there have been someone with a rifle? Someone to intervene? Or had they wandered just a step too far into a place that doesn't forgive mistakes? In Tarangire, the rules are ancient. The animals don't hate you. They don't care about your story, your purpose, or your dreams. They act on instinct. And when you make a wrong move in their world, they don't hesitate. Elephants are revered for their intelligence, their gentleness, but also feared for their power. When that power is triggered, it is absolute. A charging elephant doesn't negotiate. It doesn't pause to reconsider. It becomes a storm, and if you're in its path, it ends only one way. Dr. McAfee's final moments weren't in a hospital or a classroom, but beneath the crushing weight of something primal and unstoppable.
One woman has died and her husband is injured after the two hiked overnight in the Narrows. The Zion National Park search and rescue team first responded when visitors reported an injured man and an unconscious woman.
On November 20th, 2022, a 33-year-old man and his 31-year-old wife stepped into the mouth of the Narrows, a stunning, winding slot canyon carved by the Virgin River, where towering stone walls rise like cathedral columns on either side. It's a hike that promises beauty, solitude, and a kind of quiet adventure that speaks to the soul. But on that day, the silence would take on a colder, more merciless tone. The couple had secured a permit for the full 16-mile trek. That kind of journey isn't for the faint of heart. It demands physical endurance, mental focus, and careful preparation, especially in November. The hike requires trudging through waist-deep water hour after hour with no cell signal, no shortcuts, no easy way out. But to them, it must have felt thrilling. They moved quickly, confidently. They had each other. What could go wrong? Then the sun dipped below the canyon rim. Temperatures, which had started at a brisk but manageable 49 degrees Fahrenheit, began to drop. At first, maybe it just felt like a shiver. But as darkness bled into the canyon, the air turned cruel, bitter. The rocks radiated cold instead of warmth. And the icy river, now a constant, punishing presence, was relentless. They were far from help. No phone calls, no signal, no flares. Just the sound of their own breath turning shallow and the water lapping at their boots. Their clothes, soaked from the river, gave them no defense against the dropping temperatures. Before long, the signs of hypothermia began to set in. Shivering, slurred speech, confusion. Their bodies couldn't keep up. They were freezing from the inside out. Somewhere along the trail, they made a desperate decision. Stop, set up camp, wait for morning. They were just a mile and a half from safety. Just over a mile from warmth, lights, and rescue. But in the canyon, that distance might as well have been 100. The choice to stop wasn't wrong, it was human, and it was fatal. By morning, the woman had deteriorated quickly. She was worse off than her husband, slipping deeper into the grip of cold. Her skin likely pale and stiff, her breath shallow or gone. The man, barely hanging on himself, made the only choice he could. He left her. Imagine the agony. Leaving the person you love most in the world behind in a freezing canyon while you stumble forward, broken, for help that may or may not come, but he pressed on. He had to. for her. Somewhere along the trail, he found strangers, hikers, humans. They took one look at him and realized something was terribly wrong. Help was called. Emergency teams rushed in. More than 20 trained rescuers pushing through the same icy water the couple had faced the night before. They found the man first. He was barely conscious but alive. Rescuers brought him to the Zion Emergency Operations Center, where medical teams fought to stabilize him. Then they found her. She was lying by the river, unmoving. A hiker tried to revive her, but it was too late. Her body was already past saving. Cold. Still, she died alone in the night, surrounded by the very beauty they had come to experience together. To this day, their names have not been released. Whether out of respect for the family's grief or their own private wishes, the world only knows them as a couple. But in those anonymous figures lies something deeply haunting, because they could have been any of us. Any couple chasing a shared adventure. Any two people believing that love and courage were enough. In Zion, the land does not promise mercy, only truth. And sometimes that truth is colder than we can imagine.
The American woman mauled to death by a lioness at a South African safari park has been identified as Catherine Chappell from Westchester County.
The African sun shifting shadows over the dusty paths of the Lion Park near Johannesburg. For Catherine Chappell, it was exactly the kind of moment she lived for. She had always chased the extraordinary through her travels, through her work, through the lens of her camera. And on that June afternoon in 2015, she was chasing it again. Catherine wasn't just a tourist. At 29, she had already carved a name for herself in the world of visual effects, helping to bring Game of Thrones, Divergent, and Captain America to life on screen. She was the kind of person who made the impossible look real. But no digital monster, no studio-crafted scene could prepare her for what the wild would show her that day. She had come to South Africa with a mission. She wanted more than just photos, more than memories. She wanted to fight for something, planned to make a documentary exposing the brutal reality of poaching. This was personal to her. She believed in it. And before diving into that work, she gave herself a week to take in the land she hoped to protect. The safari vehicle creaked and rolled through the reserve, surrounded by tall grass and golden light. Birds called overhead. Somewhere in the distance, something growled low. The moment felt still and electric all at once, like the kind of silence that comes just before something happens. Then it did. From the brush, a lioness stepped into view. She was enormous, muscles flexed beneath her sleek coat with every step. Her eyes, deep, unreadable amber, fixed on the vehicle. Catherine reached for her camera, her instinct to document beauty overriding everything else. She rolled the window down. There are always rules on safari. One of them is sacred. Do not open the windows. But in that instant, the rules seemed to blur. It felt safe. It felt magical. It felt like one of those moments you're supposed to grab before it's gone. But the wild doesn't care how it feels. The lioness moved closer, calm, almost curious. Her head tilted, her eyes didn't blink. And then, without a sound, she lunged. It happened faster than anyone could scream. A blur of fur and claws and teeth. The lioness was through the window, jaws clamped onto Catherine before anyone could reach her. The vehicle exploded into chaos. Blood splattered across the seats. Catherine didn't even have time to pull back. The driver, Pierre Pogiter, fought to save her, pounding on the horn, shouting, slamming the vehicle into reverse. But the lioness was too fast, too strong. In the panic, Potgieter collapsed, struck by a heart attack brought on by the sheer terror of the moment. It was over in seconds. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. Catherine lay still, her camera shattered on the floor. The woman who had built her life telling stories, crafting fantasy and dreaming big, had become part of something achingly real. The news of her death rippled outward. Her family, her mother Mary, her father John, her siblings Jennifer, Lauren, and Ryan, were shattered. Katie was brilliant, kind, adventurous, they wrote. Her energy and passion could not be contained by mere continents or oceans. She had lived with wide-open arms. She had embraced the world, and the world had taken her. An investigation followed, but the conclusion was painfully clear. The lioness hadn't acted out of malice. She had simply acted like a lion. The wild doesn't ask questions, and it doesn't wait for logic. It responds. And when the boundary between human curiosity and animal instinct is broken, it responds without hesitation.
Tonight, the terrifying moment a safari turned fatal for an American tourist.
The African wilderness had always whispered to her, calling out with promises of wonder, danger, and beauty that couldn't be tamed. For Gail Matson, it was more than a vacation. It was a vow she'd made to herself. One last journey. One final taste of wild freedom before her 80th birthday. She'd traveled far, crossed oceans and decades to feel the rhythm of the land beneath her feet. But in Zambia's Kafue National Park, where the line between awe and peril is razor thin, her dream unraveled into a nightmare. The safari began like any other, a rumbling vehicle weaving through golden grasslands, the scent of dust and life thick in the air. The sun hung low, spilling light over the endless horizon. It was a picture-perfect moment. Cameras clicked, laughter bubbled. Somewhere in that open space between peace and adrenaline, they were exactly where they wanted to be. Then the stillness broke. Out of the brush came movement, slow, steady, and impossibly massive. A bull elephant emerged, its form both ancient and breathtaking. It moved like a shadow from another time, majestic and silent. At first, no one panicked. It was the kind of encounter safari-goers dream of. Everyone watched in awe. But the air shifted. Something about the way it stood, the way its ears lifted like flags of warning, the way the low rumble rolled through the earth. It all felt wrong, and then it charged. The change was instant, a blur of muscle and rage. The elephant lunged forward with terrifying speed, closing the distance in seconds. The guide slammed the brakes. The vehicle jerked to a halt, but it was already too late. The impact came like a thunderclap. Tusks slammed into steel. The truck rocked violently, then lifted, flipped, and crashed back down. It was chaos. Screams, metal twisting, bodies tumbling. The world turned upside down. Dust filled the air. Panic swallowed every sound. And then, silence. When the dust settled, people began to move, groaning, crying, bleeding. But not Gail. She lay still, pinned beneath the weight of the moment, the violence, the wild. Her dream of one last adventure had ended suddenly and savagely in the very place she'd longed to be. The others were pulled from the wreckage. A call for help rang out. Guides rushed to stabilize the injured. But for Gail, there was nothing left to save. Her life, full of curiosity and courage, had been taken in a flash. Later, her daughter, Rona Wells, would confirm the loss that seemed too surreal to believe. Her mother had died doing what she loved, chasing wonder. But that doesn't soften the sharp edge of tragedy, especially not when the footage surfaced, grainy, violent, unforgettable, showing the elephant's brutal charge, the helplessness of those inside, the unforgiving truth of nature's wrath. Wilderness, the safari company, claimed their guides were among the best, highly trained, deeply experienced, but all the training in the world couldn't stop what happened that day. The escape route was blocked. The terrain offered no mercy. And nature had made its choice. Wildlife photographer Marlon Dutoit tried to make sense of it. It's extremely rare to see an elephant that irate, he said. Thousands of people go on safaris every day. Most come back with stories, not scars. But the wild does not owe you safety. It does not operate on probability. It does not care about your age, your intentions, or your dreams. Gail's body was eventually flown back to the United States with the help of Zambian officials and the U.S. Embassy. Friends back home mourned a woman who had lived with fearless wonder. She told us this was going to be her last big adventure, said John Longabout, a friend from Arizona. She was about to turn 80. She thought maybe it was time to slow down. It was supposed to be a short, unforgettable adventure, just a few hours of exploring one of Zion National Park's most iconic and sought-after destinations, Keyhole Canyon. On Monday, September 14, 2015, 7 hikers set out with excitement and anticipation. Mark McKenzie, Linda Arthur and her husband Steve, Gary Favela, Muku Reynolds, Robin Broom, and Don Tenaire. Most of them were from California, connected through hiking clubs and a shared thirst for new challenges. Some had even taken canyoning courses to better prepare themselves. They weren't experts, but they weren't reckless either. By all accounts, this should have been a routine outing, just another hike. But Zion doesn't care how prepared you think you are. That afternoon, as the group descended deeper into Keyhole Canyon, a place known for its narrow sandstone walls and sudden drops, something shifted. Unseen and far above, the sky had begun to darken. Just 2 hours past noon, park rangers made a decision: shut down the canyons. A powerful storm had swept in faster than anyone anticipated. The monsoon season had struck again, but the hikers were already inside. And in a place like Keyhole, there is no signal, no sound of thunder until it's too late. No warning of the floodwaters racing toward you. It's believed they never even saw it coming. In a flash, cold, muddy water surged through the canyon like a freight train. One by one, they were dragged through the twisting corridors of stone, battered by the very terrain they'd come to admire. The desert, silent moments before, had turned into a death trap. No one knew what had happened. Not at first. Then, fate intervened. 3 hikers, strangers to the group, had crossed paths with them earlier that day. They shared a few words, helped take a group photo, a simple moment, a smile, a click of the camera. None of them knew it would be the last photograph those 7 hikers would ever take. Hours later, when the storm rolled in and the 3 hikers made it safely back to the base, they realized something was wrong. The group they'd met never returned. They reported what they saw to the rangers. Search teams raced to confirm the worst. They found the hikers' vehicles still parked, untouched. Time passed and no one came back for them. A full-scale rescue was impossible at first. The storm had turned the canyon into a violent torrent, far too dangerous for even the most experienced rescuers to enter. So they waited. Then finally, the search began. Dogs trained for disaster zones combed through mud and debris. Rangers searched every twisted bend and flooded crevice. And slowly, painfully, the truth emerged. One by one, their bodies surfaced. Over the next week, the remains of each hiker were recovered from various points along the canyon. Some had been carried miles downstream. Others were wedged between rocks. All of them were gone. No one had survived. News of the tragedy broke the hearts of their families and devastated the close-knit hiking community they came from. Eventually, a memorial bench was placed at Tanga State Park. A place to sit, reflect, and remember 7 lives lost to nature's silent fury. No plaques or statues could ever explain what really happened in those final moments. The truth likely vanished with the floodwaters. But one thing remains clear. Zion is not just a place of wonder. It's a place of power. And sometimes that power takes. It was August 2022, and Jatal Anahatri, just 29 years old, needed a break. Her days were filled with PhD in hydrology and atmospheric sciences at the University of Arizona. A rising researcher, brilliant and kind, Yal didn't often make time for herself. But this time, she did. The Narrows in Zion National Park called to her. She answered. She wasn't alone. 2 of her close friends came along for the trip. The plan was simple. Hike, laugh, exhale, recharge before the fall semester. This was supposed to be her reset button, but the canyon had other plans. As they prepared to begin their hike, park rangers issued a warning. Flash floods were possible, the kind of sudden, violent surges that can turn tranquil desert washes into death traps. Jal heard the warning. She knew the risks. Still, she went. Maybe she felt confident. Maybe she thought it would pass. Maybe she just needed to feel alive in the wild, if only for a few hours. Her friends chose to stay back. They'd meet later at the visitor center, they said. They never got that chance. At some point along the trail, the storm struck. In Zion, flash floods don't arrive like thunderclaps. They creep in, then devour everything. A wall of water, thick with debris, roared through the Narrows. The narrow stone corridor became a funnel, trapping everything in its path. Hikers who just minutes before were walking on dry rock were suddenly up to their waists in icy brown water, fighting for footing. Then fighting to stay alive. Yal couldn't swim. She, along with several others, was swept away, helpless against the raging current. Park rangers were alerted immediately. A rescue team was mobilized. They found 1 injured hiker hundreds of yards downstream and rushed them to a hospital. Others had managed to scramble onto high ground, marooned but alive. They were guided to safety once the water subsided. Rescuers asked if anyone was still missing. No one spoke up. No one knew. No one realized. Not until hours later, when Yal didn't return, her friends waited at the parking lot, watching shadows stretch long across the pavement, expecting her. Nothing came. They reported her missing. That single phone call ignited a search operation unlike anything Zion had seen that season. Over 170 emergency responders, swiftwater specialists, search dogs, drones, helicopters, and her family, devastated, hopeful, desperate, arrived to join the search. On the first day, there was only silence. On the second, that silence grew heavier. Her brother spoke to reporters, his voice shaking. He watched a piece of footage released by a local outlet. 2 people clinging to broken branches being carried away by the flood. One of them looked like Yal. He couldn't be sure, but deep down, he feared he was watching his sister's final moments. The search continued. Day 3, nothing. But they didn't stop. Rescuers scoured the most treacherous parts of the Virgin River. Log jams, deep eddies, tangled roots where water could hide a body. Still nothing. And then, on the 4th day, the current gave her back. 6 miles south of the Narrows, they found her. There was no saving her. Jal was gone. A medical examiner confirmed what her family had feared, but already knew. She had died in the flood. In the very place she'd gone to find peace, she met her end. The news rippled outward, far beyond Zion. Her university mourned deeply. Professors, students, colleagues all described her the same way. Gracious, humble, brilliant. A close friend called her the most wonderful person, someone whose kindness had no limits. On Thursday, August 25th, 2022, in a quiet room at the Metcalf Mortuary in St. George, Utah, Zhao's funeral was held. Friends gathered, her family grieved, and somewhere not far from where she took her final steps, the Virgin River kept flowing, unforgiving, eternal. It was a clear December afternoon in 2018, deep in the heart of South Africa's Madikwe Game Reserve, the kind of place where the wild still rules, where silence hums with tension, and where every tree and shadow might be hiding something ancient and untamed. At Leopard Rock Lodge, guests were sipping drinks and taking in the sun-drenched plains, unaware that something massive, something violent, was heading straight toward them. It came without warning. A bull elephant, 6 tons of muscle and fury, had broken through a fence, its mind lost to the blinding storm of must. A brutal, testosterone-fueled state that transforms even the most majestic elephant into a ticking time bomb. Rangers knew the risks. Locals knew the signs. But no one expected it to breach the boundary and charge straight into human territory. Mark Lautenbach did. He saw it coming. Mark wasn't just another guide. He was a legend, a wildlife photographer, a master tracker, and one of South Africa's most respected rangers. If anyone could stop an escalating crisis, it was him. Guests remember the way he stepped forward, calm but focused, locking eyes with the creature as it thundered closer. He wasn't running. He wasn't screaming. He was trying to stop the unthinkable. But there are moments in the wild when even the best are helpless. The elephant didn't hesitate. It charged like a freight train, the earth shaking with each step, dust exploding around its feet. In the blink of an eye, it was on Mark. One strike, then another, then another. The sound was sickening, the crack of bones beneath thousands of pounds of fury. Screams echoed through the lodge as people watched, frozen in disbelief. There was no time to intervene, no way to pull him out. The attack was over in seconds. Mark lay crushed and lifeless, his body a broken echo of the man who had once roamed these lands with reverence and skill. And the elephant, still raging, still dangerous. Rangers, their faces drained of emotion, made the impossible call, to put the animal down before it could kill again. Locals whispered about that day for months. One expert, still shaken, said softly, "Mark was the kind of man who could read the bush like a book." But that elephant wasn't listening. It had made its decision. The wild doesn't care how much you know. It doesn't bow to experience or courage or years of service. And in that moment, on that blood-stained patch of earth, it reminded everyone watching just how thin the line really is between awe and terror. In July at Beijing Wildlife Park, families in air-conditioned cars cruised slowly through the sprawling drive-through safari, cameras ready, marveling at the rare chance to see Siberian tigers up close. It was meant to be thrilling, but safe, a contained adventure. But nature doesn't care about fences, or forms, or the illusion of control. Inside one of those vehicles, tension simmered. A woman, later identified as Zhao, was locked in an argument with her companions. Words flew. Frustration built, and in a split-second act of anger, she made a decision that would change everything. She opened the car door. The rules couldn't have been clearer. Stay inside the vehicle, doors locked, windows up. But in that heated moment, she stepped out into the open, unaware or unwilling to believe that the danger was real. She barely had time to register the movement from the tree line. And then it came. Out of the brush, a tiger charged, minus 400 pounds of muscle, hunger, and precision. It struck like lightning, jaws clamping down with terrifying force, dragging Zhao off her feet and into the shadows of the enclosure. The sound that followed, the screams, cut through the summer air like sirens. Panic exploded inside the car. Zhao's mother and a man jumped out, instincts overriding fear. Her mother didn't hesitate. She ran straight toward the beast, toward her daughter, toward death, but she never made it. A second tiger, faster, meaner, more ferocious, barreled into her like a freight train. The impact was brutal. She was mauled within seconds, struck down in front of her family, her sacrifice unfolding in plain sight. She died trying to do what any mother would, save her child from the unimaginable. Surveillance cameras caught it all. The footage, leaked online and circulated across Chinese social media, showed the chaos in grim detail. The speed, the power, the helplessness of it all. Viewers watched as the tigers vanished into the undergrowth, dragging their victims with them, leaving behind only blood and disbelief. By the time help arrived, there was little left to do. Miraculously, Zhao survived. Though critically injured, her body torn and bloodied, her mother was gone. devoured by the very wilderness they'd come to admire. In the days that followed, the questions came hard and fast. Why did she get out of the car? Had she ignored the warnings, or had she never fully understood them? Zhao insisted she had no idea the document she signed at the gate was anything more than standard registration. She claimed she didn't realize the danger was real, and then came the accusations. Zhao alleged that a park official stationed in a nearby patrol vehicle failed to intervene, sat watching, perhaps frozen, perhaps indifferent, as the nightmare unfolded. Outrage erupted across the country. Who was responsible? Could it have been prevented? Was this a failure of communication or of human judgment? But the wild doesn't wait for blame. It doesn't pause for explanations. It just acts. Siberian tigers aren't villains. They're apex predators, designed by evolution to hunt, strike, and kill with perfect efficiency. Once they've targeted something, there's no pause, no second guessing. There's just the kill. Zhao's mother made a choice most wouldn't have the courage to make. She ran into the jaws of death without thinking, because that's what love looks like in its rawest, most terrifying form. A mother facing down monsters for her child. And in the end, that one moment of stepping outside, just 1 foot onto the earth where tigers roam, was all it took to turn a family outing into one of the most haunting tragedies ever witnessed in a zoo setting. The tiger enclosure at Battling remains open. Visitors still pass through with wide eyes and ready cameras, marveling at the beauty beyond the glass. But now, every wheel that rolls past those trees carries a shadow, a sense of tension, a whisper of what happened that day. It's one of the most iconic hikes in Zion National Park. Since 1926, it has pulled in hundreds of thousands of hikers, each one drawn by the promise of breathtaking views and the thrill of walking a razor's edge. But make no mistake, this trail does not forgive mistakes. The path begins innocently enough. A winding climb through stunning red canyons. A test of endurance, yes, but manageable. The danger, the real danger, waits until the final half mile. That's where the earth drops away on both sides, where hikers grip onto anchored chains for dear life, carefully navigating a narrow spine of sandstone with nothing but sky and abyss flanking their every step. One slip, one moment of hesitation, and it's over. On March 3rd, 2017, Tate Ryan Valino stepped onto that trail. He was 45 years old, a husband, a father, a writer. A man who once worked in financial services but who found greater purpose in the words he penned, the books he authored, and the lives he touched through volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity. He kayaked when he could, sought peace in nature. That day, Angel's Landing was his destination. He went alone. Perhaps it was the solitude he sought, time to reflect, to challenge himself, to be suspended between earth and sky with only his thoughts for company. No one knows exactly what drew him there that day, but he didn't tell his story on the way back down. The trail kept that for itself. Sometime during the climb, as he ascended the final perilous stretch, something happened. No one saw the moment. No one heard a scream. But somewhere along those narrow ridges, Tate Valino fell, plummeting down the unforgiving sandstone cliffs to the rocky canyon floor below. It was hikers passing through later who spotted him, motionless, broken, sprawled out on the sun-baked stone. They called for help. Zion Park authorities responded quickly, closing off the trail, deploying search and rescue teams. But there was no rescue to be made, only recovery. Tate was gone. The investigation confirmed what everyone feared: blunt trauma injuries consistent with a fall from great height. No one could say exactly how far he fell. There were no witnesses, no final words, just the wind through the canyon and a silence that swallowed the story whole. His death was the 15th on Angel's Landing, the first of that year. It was ruled a tragic accident, but Tate Valino was more than just a statistic. He wrote books with titles like The Front Nine and Pull the Pin, weaving humor and heart into stories that reflected his love for life. He gave his time freely, helping to build homes and communities. He laughed. He loved. He left behind a wife and 2 sons, names kept from the public, perhaps to shield them from a world too quick to consume pain. Somewhere along that narrow, exposed ridge, Tate took his final step. And though the trail reopened that same day, though other hikers came and went, posing for pictures at the summit, the air felt different. Because Angel's Landing demands something from everyone who climbs it. Sometimes the price is higher than anyone expects, and sometimes it's everything.